Today we go behind the taps at Veracious Brewing in Monroe, Connecticut, where owners Tess and Mark Samatulski regularly offer up almost 20 different beers on a regular basis. Opened in 2015, Veracious quickly gained both critical and customer acclaim, even earning a spot in Beer Advocate's Best New Breweries of 2015. The Samatulskis have been brewing beer for 30 years, beginning as home brewers in 1988. They found it was difficult to locate and buy homebrewing supplies, so they began the Maltos Express homebrew supply business out of their home in 1990.
So that was 88?
88 I started brewing, 89 we started selling out of our house, 90, 91 we started a store.
And the reason why we started brewing is Mark was an engineer and he always wanted to brew, and he had a couple of people that brewed at Northrop Grumman where he worked. And I was a caterer and I used like high-end beers in my catering. So he would brew the beer, I would use it in my catering, and then from there it just was, you know, he couldn't get good supplies, and that's why we started it.
Wow.
Throughout the years, Maltos Express has served as an incubator for some of the terrific breweries popping up all over Connecticut.
There's 65 breweries in Connecticut. Probably 30 of those breweries used to buy supplies from us. So we
lost 30 customers.
30 of our best customers in the last 3 years. And some of them continue to buy a few things as they are brewers that they can't get. So we did a little more business that way, but we've lost like 30 of our best customers in the last year because they became either brewers or started breweries.
And so they're buying
They buy
in bulk, yeah.
But winemaking.
They started here.
It started here, yeah.
Some started with our class, just like you did.
Yeah,
So
which is
it's
pretty
quite
cool,
amazing.
you know?
No,
yeah.
that's great.
Tess and Mark still have a passion for home brewing and even teach a home brewing class in the store.
Understand it, and that's what we do. When we have our homebrew classes, we brew a beer, we talk about hops and water and grains, pass things around and pass beers around so that you can see the process. And we brew a 5-gallon batch of beer, and then we second stage it, and this way people can see it and makes them more comfortable. Plus, we're here 7 days a week, so we're always here to answer questions, and we're just a phone call or an email away.
The Samatulskis have written 2 books for homebrewers, Clone Brews and Beer Captured. When asked how they developed the refined palate required to clone beers,
You drink a lot of beer.
People would come in and ask how to make a beer. And there was no information, there was no internet, there was no web pages, no Facebook pages, there was nothing, no information at all. So we would try the beer and try to make recipes for people. Sierra Nevada, Bass Ale, Newcastle, Guinness, those were the first 4. Okay. Sam Adams. Yeah. And you try to get in some information, and sometimes it was good, sometimes it wasn't so good, but you'd eventually make a recipe that tasted like the original.
How many test batches?
Sometimes it took 1 or 2.
And sometimes it took 8.
Yeah, sometimes you can watch and say it's real close, it's a little too bitter, and you just change it.
Yeah.
But the reason for the books is, if we didn't own a homebrew store, we couldn't have written the books because we have supplies, we brewed it again and again and again. And we would not put a beer in the book if it wasn't close. Right. I know there's one beer that I will never brew or drink again, it's Moonraker, because I had to do that 8 times till we get it. Yes. Yeah, so.
Well, luckily people come in here and drink it, so we had customers comparing it, and we had something to do with the beer.
Right, yeah.
So, but back then there was, like I said, there's no internet, there's no way to get beers. So when people traveled, we'd say, get beers and bring them back, please. Truck drivers, people on their honeymoons, we'd write letters to people in Africa and Japan and ask them
to send some beer. Wow. The Nagomo Tomo pills, that came from Africa, and they sent us there, and we actually called Africa because you couldn't email or text at that point. You had to actually call. So they were very helpful. The importer, the distributors, and and they gave us the name of the people in Africa that made the beer. And we had,
Homebrews, we tried to do a beer from almost every country. Okay. And it was funny because in that book we only had 14 beers from the United States, because at the time, 1995, 96, the United States was okay at making beer. Right. When we did updated that in 2010, out of the 50 new beers, 47 were from the United States. Wow. So things have changed from us just being a lager producer. Now we make a lot of cutting edge beers. Yeah.
So right now, America is the best country to get craft beer.
Wow.
Back then, it changed a lot.
Tess and Mark say that often the clone that you brew at home tastes better than the commercial beer.
And the thing is with beers, when you brew it in your homebrew kitchen, like let's say a beer comes from England, like a bitter or an English pale ale. It comes across the pond So it's going to lose a little bit of it. But when you brew it in your homebrew kitchen, you drink it fresh, like an English beer should be consumed.
Yep.
And it tastes even better sometimes than after it travels. Same thing in Germany, like a wheat beer, that should be consumed fresh. But if it travels, it's not going to be as fresh as when you brew it. So that's why people say, oh my God, your clones were better than the original. And that's because they traveled. Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So you guys are like way ahead of your time, do you think?
Back then, yes. Back then, yes. So, you know, homebrew stores come and go and winemaking stores come and go, but we stuck it out through good times and hard times, and we're still here.
Next, they brought us into the brew house of their
So
brewery,
really,
Veracious
I really
Brewing.
want to know, like, how does this process work? You know, like,
And how big is this place? How much beer can you brew?
So right now we have a 7-barrel system. So behind you, there's 3 vessels. There's a hot liquor tank on the left, there's a mash tun in the middle, and a boil kettle on the right. So we use these 3 vessels when we make beer. And there's black pipes going into these 3 vessels. That's steam. So we have a steam boiler in the back. We turn it on, it generates steam. All these vessels are jacketed, and so we heat everything with steam, which is a very good way to make beer on a small scale because you don't have any hot points. So it just gradually heats everything up uniformly. So we heat hot water up to about 175 degrees in our hot liquor tank. Then we mix the grain with water into our middle mash tun right here. There's a big false bottom, a big stainless steel screen in the bottom of the mash tun. So we mash for 90 minutes, and during that time, there's enzymes in the grain, and when you heat grain up to 150 to 160, the enzymes convert starches into sugars at those temperatures. So after 90 minutes, we have a big vat full of water, grain, and sugar water. So we open a valve and let the water slowly drain down to the false bottom, and then by gravity into a boil kettle. Then we put more water on top, more hot water to wash more sugar out, and we pump the rest into our boil kettle. So it's another 90 minutes. Then we start adding hops, some in the beginning for bittering, at the end for flavor and aroma. And we do that for an hour. Then we whirlpool, so I run all the wort in the boil kettle through this pump, and it forms a whirlpool. The whirlpool gets more flavor out of your hops, and it also mixes the Irish moss with all your ingredients so that all the sludge settles to the bottom. So after like 10 minutes of whirlpooling or so, we run cold water all constantly through these pipes on the walls. It's a glycol water mixture. It's like food grade antifreeze glycol.
Okay.
So it's 35% glycol, 65% water. It's always running through here at about 31 degrees. We run that through a pre-chiller on the wall, and then through this pipe, I run water through the pre-chiller, and it comes through at about 34 degrees. So I have 34-degree water going through my chiller here. I run 200-degree beer, unfermented beer, through this way. I hook a hose up to the chiller, a hose up to my fermenter, and in 45 minutes, I've got 250 gallons of 70-degree wort in the tank.
Wow.
Meanwhile, I catch hot water back in my hot liquor tank, so I could use that for the next batch.
Right.
Then through the porthole on the top, we throw in the yeast, put a blow-off tube on it, and in 10 days, we'll have a fermented beer. If it's dry hop, we dry hop after that, another 4 or 5 days.
Yeah.
So IPA may take you 17 days. Pale ale without hops would be 10 days.
So that seems really efficient, right? So you reuse the heat.
We at least reuse the heat on the water. There's not too much else you can reuse, although we do take the grain afterwards and give it to local farmers. And they feed it to cows and chickens.
Goats.
Chickens, goats. Our chicken farmer says the grain is like chicken crack. The
Oh, they
chickens
love it.
love the wet grain. And then the yeast and the sludge we put in another bucket, and farmers take that for fertilizer. So we try to be green. We have local, and some of the local farmers who we give fertilizer to grow our hops.
Oh, so
that's
it comes
great.
full circle.
Yeah.
Yeah,
we have
it's full
beehives on
circle.
our property too, so we get to use the honey. So we try to do things locally and environmentally.
That's smart.
Yeah, you
That's
try.
really smart.
And right now we have 12 10-barrel fermenters, so that's 310 gallons. And over here we have two 20-barrel fermenters, that's 620 gallons. So these are Right now there's 2 empty ones just because we're cleaning them, but they're pretty much always full or always planned to be full the next week.
Wow. So when you say 7-barrel system, that's what you can.
7
what you
barrels
can
is what the
brew.
system was made for,
It's
but
not-
I always make a little more. I always make 8 to 10 barrels out of it.
How many gallons are in a barrel?
31 gallons.
Okay.
And
quite a lot.
we just pretty much took our homebrew recipes and multiplied them up. And that's where you start.
Yeah.
The difference between this and home brewing is how you use your hops, how you dry hop.
Right.
You know, maybe you could whirlpool differently. There's a lot of things you could do a little differently here that you don't have the freedom to do at home.
Yeah.
Plus all the fermenters, they have a jacket on them too. So glycol will cool all the fermenters down so you can ferment at a perfect temperature all the time.
I think that's always my downfall is temperature control.
You need to be consistent. Like we could ferment a Pilsner at what? What do you do?
I
Ferment
start at 50 and I'll slowly go up to 63. Most beers we ferment around 68. But you could lager a beer. I go down a couple of degrees a day. There's a lot of control of it. It's nice. Our Belgians became much better here because Belgian yeast tend to take off and get too hot and give you a lot of off noses, off aromas. But here, it ferments
Everything,
perfect.
yeah, temperature controlled.
Yeah, big difference.
Yeah.
And we try to keep it very clean, inside and outside. There's a lot of cleaning involved.
Yeah.
We clean the fermenters and sanitize them with 3 or 4 different methods before we put a beer in there.
Right. Yeah, no, it is spotless.
We tried.
Absolutely spotless.
Well,
Good.
it makes me want to try some beer.
Yeah.
Me too.
How did you guys come up with the design of the tap room?
Well, we didn't want it to be stark. We wanted it to be inviting, and we wanted it to be more like an English pub than industrial. And this space is industrial. It's got very high ceilings, but we have church pews on the walls, and our tables are made of church pews, drink rail, and the beams over there. So what we did was there was a Methodist church in New Canaan that wanted to revamp their church, and they said that if we took all the church pews, they would give them to us. And that's what we did. So the church pews are red
Red oak. on the
oak,
walls.
yeah, which is, and our sign is also made out of the church pews.
The back of the
That's
pews
great.
were made out of hard maple, so we made the bar out of that, and those tables and the drink rail. So we used every bit we could.
Yeah. Wow. That's amazing. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks.
Very inviting.
So our first IPA we call it 29 pews because it took 29 pews worth of wood to do these 2 walls.
Wow.
Interesting.
So this is 29 pews, and right now we're on our 32nd version of it.
Oh, really?
We tweak it every time, but now that we're canning it, the tweaks are much smaller.
Yeah.
But we keep trying to get better. And we asked we first started this as a home brew, and we put it in the store before we opened, and we did one with American yeast and one with British yeast, and said, what do you guys like more? And 90% like the British yeast. So we make this beer with British yeast, and give it a shot, see what you think.
And that's your first one in your flight? So what we want you to do is when you come in here, we just don't want you to grab a beer and just drink it and throw it back. We want you to look at it. We want you to admire it. We want you to look at the head and the color. And then we want you to smell it. And we want the beer to entice you into taking a sip. So once you take that first sip, which I'll do right now, we want you to say, wow. And we want you to invite to take another sip. And we want you to feel sad when the glass is like half empty because we're saying, oh boy, this is almost finished. We want you to feel really, really, really sad when you finish it. So there's a realm of emotions that we want you to do. But then when Jeff will say, would you like another beer? That's when the happiness comes in. So he is, and he does. But there's a whole series of emotions that we want you to experience when you pour a beer. We don't want you to just say, oh yeah, great, drink, it's a beer.
So
it's not. It's an experience. It's an experience. We want you to range from happy when Jeff hands you the beer, to smell it, to invite you, to be kind of sad when it's half full, really sad when it's all the way done, but then Jeff will make you happy when he pours you another one.
We like Jeff.
We like Jeff, yes.
5 different IPAs in right now. We try to make them all different.
Yeah.
This one's more citrusy. We have some that are piney. We have an old school that has some crystal malt in it. We do a double IPA with some Galaxy.
So the old school one is darker than
It's
and
darker.
more
They don't.
bitter, or?
Yeah, they don't want anything dark.
Right.
People like less bitter beers nowadays, and they like lighter color IPAs. So this is about as dark as we get.
So this is very, very citrusy, fruity.
Yes,
so.
we want something citrusy, fruity. The British yeast makes it extra fruity.
Right.
Where American yeast is crisper and cleaner.
Yeah.
Your British yeast make things fruity. They don't clear as much, so your beer ends up a little cloudy, which is acceptable today.
Yeah. This is delicious.
It's very refreshing, but it's a well-balanced IPA. It's not too bitter where it's going to strip your palate and make you not drink another beer. And you can taste all the hops and the different grains in there too. So we like balanced beers. We don't want anything that's going to go, whoa, you know, and knock your socks off because it's too bitter or too hoppy. So this, I think, is a really, really nice IPA, well balanced. Got a nice malt backbone, which balances off the hops.
It started as a home brew, and then here also today we have Black Velvet, which started as Tessa's homebrew. We were cloning Brooklyn Black Chocolate, but it came out too smooth. So Bud, who works for us, said, gee, you should call this something like Black Velvet, and we did. And so now it's a brewery beer. Lucy's Last Call. This started as a home brew as well, Belgian triple.
Which is my favorite style of beer, Belgians.
And this was our most surprising beer. It sells very well. And we didn't know if a Belgian beer would take off. You know, in Connecticut.
And this is named after our golden retriever, Lucy. And she would, every night before she passed, when Jeff did the last call, she would go around to every person in here and either give them a lick or a hug. And that's why we call it Lucy's Last Call, because we would say, Lucy, last call, and she would go and do that for us. So, yeah, she was
Couldn't
she was
let
a
her
good
out
girl.
before, though, because she liked food. So
Yeah.
the dog say goodnight. And then the fourth beer we have today is Blues. It's our blueberry beer. It also started as a home brew, although it was a 9% home brew. And we wanted it to be a little lighter here in the brewery. I think this version is 6.5%, 6.4.
Yep.
So let's see, what do we want to try next? Let's try Bloobs next. Okay. So Bloobs, when we originally did it here, we used West Coast blueberries, but we started using local fruit. So we used blueberries from Jones's family farm. And when we did, the beer came out tart. It was almost like a sour because the local soil is very acidic and it makes the blueberries acidic, which makes the beer tart.
Right.
So here we've switched back to West Coast fruit because they're out of local blueberries. And people like it more, this version.
Because it's less tart.
It's less
It's less
tart.
tart. We use a pound of blueberries for each gallon of beer.
And that's a lot. But I was telling them that this year we might put some local blueberries in with the Oregon blueberries and just,
little balance.
yeah, it'll be an East-West Coast blend of blueberries.
Oh, this is very good.
More people like this version more. The people that like sours like the tart version more,
Right.
but they would say it's not a blueberry beer, it's a sour.
Yes.
So
How long have you been doing it this way?
this is the first time we've done it this.
Okay, because I've had Bloobs before. And
This is different, yes.
It's different.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking next time I'll use a little bit of local blueberries, but still more West Coast to give you more of the blueberry flavor. But I like a little tartness. And you have a little tartness in here, but I had to really work to get it.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
But this is a very popular beer. So on a normal, like last Saturday, 29 Pews is our biggest selling beer. Bloobs was number 3. So they're usually very big selling beers when we have them in tap.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's actually good for this. It's a good summer beer.
It is.
Very good summer.
And it's not too high in alcohol where you can only drink one glass. But just the smell just really invites you, just the smell of the blueberries.
Yeah, the mouth feels nice on it.
Yeah.
And that's the tartness coming from the blueberries.
Yeah.
Like I know my wife would drink this. You know.
So our next beer we're going to try here is Lucy's Last Call. It's a Belgian Golden, very similar to a Belgian Triple. It's 9.3%. This is probably the 8th version we made, and I like this one the most. We love Belgian beers, and we love triples. So we wanted to make something like that in the tap room, and it turns out we make it all year long because people buy it.
Yeah.
Wow.
I didn't know if it would go over in the local environment, but it did.
Right.
It's named after our Golden Lucy.
Yeah.
She was a good girl.
And if you're a wine drinker, this is your go-to beer because it's the most like wine. Yeah.
So I thought this came out much better as a commercial beer because we control the temperature better. On our fermenters, they're all controlled, automatically temperature controlled. And I try not to ferment this too warm, so it's a smoother beer without too many sharp notes.
Right.
That's
Yeah, you
very
can taste that.
And the
I would
Belgian,
not guess this is 9%.
No.
no.
But if you have a
Belgian
couple of
yeast-
glasses, yeah, it will.
Belgian yeast ferments very dry, so there's always a struggle to keep this beer with a little body. We mash very high when we mash the beer at a high temperature to create more less fermentable sugars, but it still ferments out very dry. So it's a lot of work, but it's a good solid beer, and sells for us. We'll can this eventually.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So all these beers started as home brews. We have had a lot of new ones that came up since then, but they all started as home brews. And then this one right here, Black Velvet, this started when we were making our books. We made this beer and we liked it and we kept it. Then we continued to try to make the recipe for the book. So this was Tessa's recipe. And the nice thing about this beer is we make it several different ways. We have the same grain bill, but we make it as Black Velvet. We have another one that we put raspberries and chocolate in the fermenter, same grain bill. We have another one that we put espresso in after we make the beer.
Yeah.
We have another one that we put a little smoked grain in it, and it becomes like a smoky beer. And then we have another one that we put a Belgian yeast in.
Oh, really?
So we're using the same grain bill. We make 5 different beers. And next year we want to put those all in a 5-pack. We want to put them all in a 6-pack, probably with a barrel-aged one.
Yeah.
And Tessie had a story about them. She was going to call them.
This is our love series. So the first one is Black Velvet. The second one with the raspberries and chocolate in it is called Foreplay. The third one with the
Belgian yeast.
Belgian yeast
It's called
Consummation.
Which we have on the board right now.
Yeah, Consummation is on the board. The fourth one is
With the smoked grain.
smoked grain. That's
Afterglow.
Afterglow.
And the 5th one was with the espresso, called the Morning After.
Morning after.
so-
Yeah.
I love it.
So,
So we're
yeah.
going to try to bring that out for Valentine's Day next year.
That's great.
And then we're going to do a 6th one.
Well, Jeff said name it Baby or no. What'd you say?
We'll make like the sweet
Divorce court.
Divorce court.
make the sweet stout and call it Baby, or we'll do a vintage beer.
Milk
Right.
stout, yeah.
Yeah.
Milk stout. There you go.
No, oh, what have I done?
I love
So,
that.
so
Love
we've
that
made
series.
these beers for a
uh-oh.
while. before we had the brewery. All these beers were things we had made.
Yeah.
We made this one in mind for the brewery, and the other ones we had been making.
Yeah.
And we just kept tweaking them.
So consummation is just the different yeast. That's the only
Different yeast. Yeah. The only difference is a Belgian yeast, and Jeff will do that for you.
They sell steady on their own.
Sure.
They
So
sell a lot
try
more
it
in the
next
wintertime
time.
than they do
Yeah, the summer.
other times a year. So now you could try this beer. This is the same grain bill,
Same beer.
different
Yeah.
yeast.
Same grain bill, same hops, same
Everything.
Everything but the
And it's
yeast.
the
But the
yeast we
yeast.
usually use for Lucy's, so it's a Belgian yeast. It attenuates more. It gives you a lighter bodied beer. The beer becomes 9.5% instead of 8.6.
Oh, it is lighter.
Yeah.
It's just interesting to see what it's like.
Mm-hmm.
More carbonation.
And that's the first time we made it, so it's good to try it.
Yeah.
We'll tweak it before we can it, but
I like this one.
it's
Good.
very different.
Out of the two, which one do you like better? I'm just
I like this one because it's lighter.
okay.
I like
me
this one because
personally.
it's chocolatey.
Okay. But it's amazing what just one yeast will do.
Right.
Yeah.
2 different yeasts, and it's the whole profile of the beer has changed.
Yeah. This is really good.
And so now we're canning. We canned 4 beers so far. So we canned a pale ale Mommy's Boy. That's Ralphie, our dog. That's an easy drinking pale ale. And we canned Golden Summer. It's a lighter version of Lucy's that you could drink in the summertime. It's only 5.5% instead of 9. Those were our 2 Goldens. And then 29 Pews has sort of become our flagship beer.
Yeah.
We sell a lot of it. It's usually the biggest selling beer in the tap room. So we thought that'd be good to can. And we did a double IPA as well.
So I'm excited to try your beer.
Okay, let's get
Okay, here we go. So it's a pale ale?
Well, that's what it turned out. Originally, we wanted it to be a session IPA. We're always looking for low alcohol stuff to just sit outside and drink. So that was the plan. So,
All right.
So you dry hops Matoika.
yep, Citra, Amarillo.
Okay, you can smell the citra. And the Matoika usually gives you lemon notes.
Nice aroma.
Thanks.
So usually when you rate a beer, it's on a scale of 50. So the aroma is 0 to 12.
Okay.
That's your first score you give a beer. I rate every beer I try. I rate every beer I make. And it's good to do it.
Yeah.
So you have a nice aroma. So it's like let's say it's an 8 for aroma.
Okay.
and
take
then there's
that.
clarity, which is 3 points. I give everything a 3, unless it's brown. So you got 11 points so far. And then for flavor, it's a 20-point scale. So flavors where beers are usually made or lost. So let's give it a shot.
I would like more flavor in this beer.
Okay, so your flavor's nice. So let's say your flavor is 11. That gives you 22. So you have a nice flavor, but
Always the judge.
it could be a little more flavor, right?
Yeah.
You could have a little more in there.
Yeah,
little more-
it's a
just a little
little,
watery.
it's a
It's
little
nice.
thin. It's a
It's
little
in
thin.
body.
Yeah.
It needs
Okay.
more mouthfeel.
Yeah.
Then your next thing is mouthfeel. It's 5 points. So you got like a 3. You have a nice mouthfeel. It's not great. It's not bad.
Yeah,
So
you
that's
give this a
like-
3?
Yeah, so that's like 25. And the last is 10 points for overall impression. What do you think about the beer? And you could have bad scores all the way through, but still love the beer.
Interesting.
So you have a great aroma.
The aroma's really nice.
See where you're going with it, and
Yeah.
once you
Your flavor's
tweak it
more
a
like an
little bit,
English pale ale.
fantastic. Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a great idea behind it.
So we'll give you 5 for overall impression. So you get like a 30.
Okay.
So 30 is a good
Out
score.
of 50.
Out of
Yeah,
50.
but I only give like 2 or 3 40s a year. So
Yeah.
it's very unattainable, a high score. So it's a nice beer. You just need a little more mouthfeel.
Yep.
So you need a little more body. So if you're doing
Yeah.
extract, throw a little maltodextrin in there. If you're mashing, mash a little
Right.
higher.
Okay.
You want a little more complexity of flavor. It tastes to me like a nice English bitter, and it smells like a nice pale ale, American pale ale.
Yeah.
So take your Cascade and up it a little bit, or throw a couple other more hops in there, maybe a little Citra.
More in the bittering hops, more
Your
in the boil.
bittering, your
No,
bittering's
bittering's fine.
perfect.
Your bittering's fine. Don't change the
But you
bittering.
want to give it a little more flavor, because the aroma's really nice.
Yeah.
Flavor and dry out.
and
Yeah.
A little more body.
A little more body because
So
it's a
more
little
body
thin.
Will be the
Nice job.
maltodextrin.
Yes.
Will give it more
Yeah.
body.
It's
Thank you
Yeah,
so much.
cheers. Yeah.
Cheers.
Good
This was
job.
great.
I still
Thank
have
you.
a little in
Yeah.
there. There it is. Great
Yeah.
job, guys.
It's not fair because we drank their beers first.
Yeah.
Oh, stop.
We tainted your palate, that's all.
Yeah.
It's nice beer.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, with a couple of tweaks, perfect.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
A
we'll
couple of
make those
tweaks are
tweaks.
perfect.
It smells
Yeah.
like a pale ale. It drinks like an English bitter.
Yeah.
You want a little more body, a little more hop flavor.
Yeah.
But
So
no more
that's
bitterness.
late
No more
edition
bitter. Yeah, no more
Yeah.
bitterness.
Bitterness is good.
Little more
10 to 15
mouthfeel.
minute
Yeah.
hops thrown something
Yeah.
else.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, good beer.
Yeah. I mean, it's a great first attempt.
Thank you.
No, you're welcome. I mean, I told you to be honest.
Yes.
Voracious.
want.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You're not going to get anything else from us but being honest.
The name.
The name is everything.
That's right.
So,
Well,
Cool.
thank you so much for doing that.
Oh, yeah.
I really appreciate it.